uključi.
Počelo je snimanje.
Good day. Hello.
Okay, I believe we can begin now. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Personal Assistance for People with Intellectual Disabilities. I will speak in English because we have participants from other countries as well. We have participants from Bulgaria and Bulgarian interpretation. So I would kindly ask whoever can speak in English to do so, so we can have equal participation as much as possible. Who can't speak English, that's okay, and Serbian will be translated into English so everyone can follow English unless they understand Serbian. For everyone, just a small reminder that you have an interpretation button below, and please choose English for English, Japanese for Serbian, and Bulgarian for Bulgarian. Unfortunately, there was no current option for Serbian, so if you want Serbian interpretation, choose Japanese. To listen to the original language, press off. Also, in the chat box, you will find a link, and we are kindly asking you to press the link, which should be posted soon, so you can tell us your name and the country you are coming from. The link is now posted to everyone, so you should be able to access it and fill in the questionnaire. Let me welcome everyone once again to our webinar, Personal Assistance for Adults with Intellectual Disabilities, where we are going to hear about experiences and opportunities. The webinar is co-hosted by Mental Disability Rights Initiative of Serbia and European Network for Independent Living, and supported by UN Human Rights Team in Serbia and Disability Rights International. My name is Dragana Ćirić Milovanović, and I'm a director of European programs of Disability Rights International. So I will just, my role was just to give you some housekeeping information and to welcome everyone. I would like to welcome all our speakers, and the first one to address everyone will be Ines Bulic Cojocariu, Deputy Director of European Network for Independent Living, who will tell us about ENIL's definition of personal assistance and its significance for independent living of adults with intellectual disabilities. So welcome, Ines, and please.
Hvala Dragana, dobar dan svima. And I'm going to continue in English now. Hello, everyone. Very nice to be here. Thank you for the introduction. We are very pleased at ENIL that we have been happy to put together this meeting on personal assistance for adults with intellectual disabilities. We will hear from a number of people who have personal experience of personal assistance. But just to set the context, I would like to explain a little bit what personal assistance is. Now, for those of you who might be familiar with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, you will know that personal assistance is one of the few services specifically mentioned in Article 19 of the Convention on the Right to Independent Living. So Article 19 says that disabled people, persons with disabilities, should have access to a range of services, including personal assistance. Personal assistance is also defined in the General Comment 5 on Article 19. It has a very detailed definition, and the reason for this is that not every service, not every individual service can be called personal assistance. It is a very specific service for a number of reasons, which I will just explain. First of all, just to start by saying that for ENIL, for the independent living movement, personal assistance is a key tool for independent living. Not everyone might need personal assistance, but a lot of persons with disabilities, including persons with intellectual disabilities and persons with psychosocial disabilities, need personal assistance to live independently and to be included in the community. But for personal assistance to be in line with Article 19 of the Convention and to really support independent living, it has to comply with certain conditions. First of all, personal assistance must be provided based on an individualized assessment. So we cannot say that all persons with a certain impairment will have the same number of hours of personal assistance. It has to be personalized, individualized. It will be different for children. It will be different for people who are working. It will be different for students. It will be different for older people, because it also depends on their lifestyle, on the things they like doing, they are doing in their lives, how active or not active they are. So the number of hours has to be based on individual needs. And funding has to be provided to cover the hours that the person needs. The service has to be controlled by persons with disabilities themselves. Now, they can choose to manage everything on their own, or they can choose to use somebody in the middle, a service provider or a cooperative or a center for independent living, to help them, for example, recruit assistants or pay their salaries, keep the administration, etc. But it is the service that is managed by persons with disabilities. They should be in charge, and they should decide where and how their personal assistant supports them. Personal assistance is very much a one-to-one relationship. So we cannot have a situation where 5 people live together and they all share one personal assistant. No, it is one person, one personal assistant for one person. And people may choose to share an assistant, but it has to be their choice. But it is a one-to-one relationship. And the final point, the final characteristic is that is the self-management of the service delivery. Again, it is that the person who needs personal assistance remains at the center. So for people, for example, with intellectual disabilities, they may choose to control their personal assistant through supported decision-making, with the help of a parent or with the help of someone else, but it is the person themselves who is at the center. So it's not about the personal assistant will come, at I don't know, 10 o'clock in the morning because they're seeing somebody else before, or that is what the agency decides. The way the person is supported should be very individualized, and the personal assistants should be there when they need them, not based on some other circumstances. And the final point also mentioned in the general comment, which is very important, is that personal assistance should also be available for people with different who use different forms of communication. So that should be also accommodated for, so that a person may communicate with their personal assistant and vice versa. So just to sum up, it is clear that personal assistance is aimed at everyone. There is nothing in Article 19 or the General Comment 5 to say that personal assistance is not suitable for any group of persons with disabilities. It is just about making sure that there is a right to personal assistance for everyone, and making sure that it is regulated in a way for it to really be an individualized one-on-one service that supports independent living. So I would end here, and I'm also very much looking forward to hearing about experiences from other countries, which I hope will be useful for colleagues here from Serbia and Bulgaria. Thank you. That's it from me.
Our next speaker for today. Oh, okay. Yeah.
If I could just ask, is anybody who is chairing the meeting? It will be easier if the one person will chair the meeting and give a floor to different people. Thank you.
Radoše, da li možeš ti da preuzmeš tu ulogu?
Može, naravno, mislim da je Dragana ili da ste vi, but I will gladly moderate. All right. So, thank you, Ines, for an introduction and for covering the basics about what personal assistance is. And now we have 5 designated speakers, guest speakers from different countries of Europe who agreed to come and share their experiences with us, their experiences of using of personal assistance, actually their family members. So the first speaker is coming from Belgium, and this will be Mr. Jos Huys. Jos Huys is a legal expert and policy analyst. So Jos, the floor is yours. So please tell us about the system in Belgium.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I will tell you about the system of personal budgets in support of people with disabilities in Flanders. Okay, we can pass to the slides, maybe.
Yes, if you can share it from your side by clicking the share screen button, the green button below, I think it should work.
No, it's not on this computer.
All right, so
can you show them?
Yeah. I'm wondering, do we have the assistance of technical support, like to tell us how you can share it from your side? Because you should be able, even though you're not the co-host. If not, then I can share it from my side internet. But Mihailo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Share screen is on for all participants, so there is no restrictions.
That's
for co-hosts.
what I thought. So Jos, if you see below the line of the icons, is there a middle icon called share screen, the green button?
Huh?
Okay, if not, then give me a minute and I can share the slides from my side.
Yeah, the slides are not on this computer.
Oh,
It's
I understand. I understand. So you don't have them at all. With
my computer has no Zoom. So I use the computer of my assistant.
So I just turned them on from my side, and I will be sharing now from my screen. So it should come in a second. And then please indicate to me when you want the next slide to be moved. So.
Yes, for sure.
So is it visible to all?
Yes.
Okay, Jos, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay. We pass to the next slide.
Yes, the next slide is on. I hope you see it.
So I talk about personal budgets system in Flanders. Flanders is one of the 3 regions of Belgium. Belgium is a federal state, and the welfare policy for people with disabilities is committed to the regions. So I limit my contribution to Flanders, the northern part you see on the map here. Yeah. We pass to the next slide. So this is the scheme of my presentation for about 10 minutes, and afterwards I stay available for all your questions, of course. Next slide. Okay, let me give some history of the personal budget system in Flanders. We had a very active independent living movement from 1987. And so we succeeded after 10 years of struggle to have a first experiment with personal budgets in 1997, involving only 15 people, only with physical impairments. But soon we had a second experiment from 1999 that was expanded to 42 people and also included people with intellectual disabilities. The personal budget scheme got a legal basis by the decree of the Flemish Parliament of 17 July 2000. And since then, it has been growing steadily. So at the end of 2020, about 6,200 people with disabilities receive a yearly cash personal budget. And these cash budgets represent a yearly cost of about 160 million euro, which is still less than 10% of the yearly budget of the Flemish agency. More than 85% of the expenditures of this agency are still spent on subsidies to institutions. We don't have figures on the exact share of people with intellectual disabilities, but they represent undoubtedly a substantial part of the budget holders. We pass to the next slide, which deals with the eligibility criteria. Eligibility is granted on the basis of a person's need of assistance by others in all activities of daily living, such as personal hygiene, eating, dressing, assistance outside the home, at school, work, and if applicable, also in communicating, structuring the day, and similar cognitive or pedagogical support. Children or others without legal capacity are allowed to the scheme, and then their parents or other legal representatives act as the budget holder. People who got disabled after the age of 65, however, are excluded. But I have to stress that people with disabilities are only entitled to use their personal budget within the limits of the annual budget that is established by the Flemish government. So it means, for instance, at the end of December 2020, about 18,000 people who got a personal budget attributed were still on the waiting list to have it at their effective disposal. Okay, next slide, please. Assessment is conducted by so-called multidisciplinary teams that fill out a questionnaire about one's possibilities to perform activities of daily living. The needs assessment takes into account the whole life situation of the person and aims to enable assistance users to fulfill the role they would have had without a disability. The assessment includes the need of assistance users who, due to a cognitive impairment, need support in dealing with service providers and their personal assistants. In the case of children, the policy covers assistance needs, parental responsibility that would apply in the case of a non-disabled child. In the case of adults, the assessment does take into account the assistance that family members in each individual case reasonably can deliver. Important, the assessment does not take into account the personal income of the person with disability and his family members. Okay, we pass to the next slide. How can we spend these yearly cash budget? The amount of which is ranging according to the degree of assistance needs between 10,000 and 48,000 euro for minors and between 12,000 and 82,000 euro a year for adults. This money is not paid out at once. Individual cash budgets are earmarked for reimbursement of assistance costs made by the budget holder and proven by support documents on the basis of contracts with service providers such as housekeeping services, taxi services, or personal assistance. Anybody from the age of 18 years on can act as a personal assistant, also family members. No specific qualifications are required. Cash budgets for children and adults with intellectual disabilities are frequently used to pay one of the elders while the other parent acts as the legal representative of the budget holder. Another popular trend consists of living in small group homes with other adult persons with a disability sharing their person-centered budgets. So I arrived to my conclusion within the 10 minutes. The conclusion seems to me that Flanders has a legislation that allows people with disabilities to organize their support with a personal budget, whether their impairments are of physical or intellectual nature. It's a great tool for independent living. However, after a struggle of more than 30 years, the use of personal assistance is still marginal. More than 85% of the financial means for support of people with disabilities is still spent on institutional care. The situation has not substantially changed since the CRPD committee, in its concluding observations on the first report of Belgium, highlighted the lack of real deinstitutionalization plans and recommended all regions, including Flanders, to reduce investment in collective infrastructure and to promote personal choice. So we still have a lot of work ahead. Thank you for your attention. I don't know if the questions can come now or after the other speakers. Anyway, I will stay available for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jos, so much. I will stop sharing the screen now. Just a second. And we will open the floor for questions once we hear from all presenters. So, but please, everyone, if you have any questions now when you heard Jos' presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat, and then we can pick them up later during the discussion, and Jos can maybe read them and think about the responses. But thank you, Jos, for highlighting the system of direct payments in Belgium. We will discuss later about different systems, direct payments in the system which goes through service providers. But thank you for highlighting also the role of parents as budget holders, as you said, the ones who are helping with the coordination of the assistance. I will continue with our speakers. So let me just take a look at the agenda. So next person to speak is Asa Smits. Asa, I hope that I'm pronouncing your name well. But Asa is coming from Netherlands, and she's independent disability policy analysis. She's also the member of the academic network of European disability experts, and she is ex-parliament member in Netherlands, also a mother of a person with disability. Asa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Radus, could you put up my presentation as well? Because if I do it myself, I'll lose the video.
All right, so I can do the same as I did with Jos. Just give me a second. So it will take me a minute to find it. Yeah,
Yes, of course.
so it's coming in a few seconds. All right, I'll click now to share my screen. Let me just make it a full screen, so it should be visible now. All right, there we go. I hope it's visible to everyone.
So I will tell you about our direct payment system in the Netherlands as an enabler of personal assistance. Could you do the next slide, please? No, I'm meant to show pictures.
All right, so the other one is.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Well,
I'm afraid this is the only one you shared with me. So
oh,
if you
okay.
have another one,
I'm sorry,
please.
something went wrong. So I'll put on the slides again. The second one. I'll tell you. I wanted to show pictures of my daughter. She is. I have 3 children, by the way, and the eldest has brain damage, resulting in difficulties, physical difficulties, and she cannot speak. She needs one-on-one assistance during day and night. And she was, well, from birth, we had trouble getting her into daycare center and getting her into school. When she was 5, she was in a regular school, which was amazing. And she got some support from a daycare center. And this daycare center went bankrupt. And just at that time, the system of personal budget or the direct payment was introduced in the Netherlands. And we were one of the first applicants for that. After that, she has been receiving a direct payment, enabling her to hire personal assistants, with which she went to school. Well, I wanted to show a picture when she graduated from law school. So she has been in school, mainstream school, off and on, and applied to university, and all the while she had a personal assistance. Without the personal budget, it would not have been possible at all. It was actually sort of a lifesaver for her. Because there's no regular support for children in special schools or from care providers, I mean. So Radus, could you put on the slides again, because I don't see them?
Yes, I can do that. It's coming now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be visible now.
Second slide, please. So this shows you some background of the Netherlands. We have lots of special schools. Many children with complex needs are refused in special schools, as was the case with my eldest daughter. There are daycare centers for children with complex needs, or even centers where you can live day and night for children. There are lots of residential institutions for disabled and elderly people. I've seen data from Europe, and I think there's no country which houses so many elderly people in institutions as in the Netherlands. But 30 years ago, there was a movement towards independent living. It was the example, of course, from Scandinavia and probably the United States, which meant that a group of activists in the Netherlands strived for independent living for especially people with physical disabilities. And at the same time, there were parents of children with mainly Down syndrome who were fighting to get their children included in mainstream schools. Both requested for more support to enable the independent living, but also the inclusion in the mainstream schools. Next slide, please. In 1995, after a very successful political lobby, the system was introduced. One of the main rules was every care budget should be around 75% of the budget that is paid to residential institutions. Why 75%? Because in the budget that an institution receives, there are also the costs of housing. When you receive a personal care budget, you're in your own house, so you don't need the 25% to pay for your house. The budget vary dependent on the type of disability. I've put in here the figures, 45,000 to 130,000 euro a year. Those are the figures from this year, not 1995, but it's a sizable budget, but even the high budget of 130,000 euro a year, when you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week personal support, this budget will give you less than 20 euro an hour to pay for your personal assistance. So it looks a lot of money, but in reality, it's not that much, because in the Netherlands, paying a wage of 20 euro an hour is not very much. The money is not transferred, but it is available on a bank account as a personal budget. And there's a central agency who actually pays the wages to the personal assistants. The highest budgets are for people with sensory and physical disabilities. The lowest are for people with intellectual disabilities and the elderly. Because people with intellectual disabilities and the elderly with dementia are supposed to live in group and to enjoy living in group. I read a policy report once that said that people with intellectual disability enjoy family life, so the group living is a substitute for family life. And everyone, by the way, has to pay an obligatory care contribution, which may vary from 25 to 800 euro per month. So you get a lot of money, but you pay for it as well. Next slide, please. At first, it was limited the system to people deemed able to organize their own care and payment system. So people with intellectual disabilities and mental health problems were excluded in the beginning, but it didn't last long. Children with disabilities were included as long as parents were deemed able to handle all the administrative demands. The system now is that anyone can receive a personal budget as long as you have a volunteer who is certified as a qualified administrator. And it must be a volunteer. So no commercial agencies are allowed in. Next slide, please. The system was an immediate success. It was introduced and used as an alternative to residential care. It allowed people to have more flexible arrangements. You could hire your own personal assistant. You can negotiate about wages. You can negotiate when they start work and when they can leave. It's used for personal assistants at home, but also for all the children with disabilities to hire personal assistants going with the child into a mainstream classroom. 75% of a residential care budget is usually enough. It's usually enough for children, at least. And one of the reasons why it is enough is if you hire your own personal assistant, you can negotiate wages and there's no overhead. If you work as with a care provider, as an assistant or providing support, the care provider gets probably about 60 euro an hour, and the net wage would be 20 euro. So a lot of the money is used for taxes and overhead costs. And if you work with a personal budget system, you can avoid the taxes. I won't go into the details, but you can avoid taxes. So it's a lot cheaper to work that way. The success was such that people who refused to send their children to institutional care or who refused to go live in institutions, they could apply now for the personal budget system. My own example is like that. We refused our daughter to go to the daycare center, which would have cost a lot of money because the care provider would have been paid. But once the personal budget system was introduced, we gladly accepted the budget to arrange for her care. The alternative was much better. So a lot of people who refrained from using the care provided by care agencies started applying for the personal budgets. Next slide, please. Like I said, a lot of parents with children with disabilities use the personal budgets to enable support to personal assistance to go into the mainstream schools. We have a very segregated education system. In primary school age, 5% of children are in special schools. Secondary schools, the percentage is even higher. And nowadays, 6,000 children with complex needs are not accepted in special schools. But this personal budget system enabled to provide this one-on-one assistance, and that made them more acceptable for mainstream schools than special schools. But once the system sunk in, special schools started, I call it abusing the system, because they demanded parents to apply for personal budgets and use the budget to pay for extra care in the special schools. Next slide, please. One of the things was that the budget could never be higher than the average cost of a place in an institution. So if you would apply for a personal budget and would say, I need this much in hours or this much in euros, the care insurance company who pays for the personal budget would say, well, it's cheaper to live in the institutions. And institutions can be cheaper because they have this forced group living. They share the personal assistance. Like Ines said, you could live in a group of 5 and have one personal assistant who was to support the 5 people. But there were several court cases. Parents of children sued, and they said children have a right to family life. We need the care at home, and they won these cases. So what happened then was that the individual budgets were raised above the average cost of the institutional budget. Next slide, please. The success of the instrument invoked protest and abuse. I'm sorry, there's a typing error. The end should be and abuse. I remember one meeting in Parliament when I was a member of Parliament. We talked about this this personal budget system, and one of my colleagues said, well, I found out that people who have a personal budget use it to go to a discotheque or to go on holiday or to hire someone who does maintenance in their garden and cook their food. We even had people who wanted to retire to Spain and take the personal budget. And the general sense of this this party and this member of parliament was that public money is then spent to do fun things. Of course, it showed that they didn't really understand what independent living looks like. They compared living they compared the personal budget system with living in an institution, and in institutions there's no organizing fun things. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but it was sort of a bit of jealousy played a role. If we have to finance care for people with complex needs and it needs to be intensive care, it has to be sober because it's expensive enough. And if you're able to use a personal budget system then in a very creative way and you do such fun things, the critique was that it can be done cheaper. So that's that was part of the feeling of people criticizing the personal budget system. And at the base of this criticism, there was also the lobby by people defending residential institutions. They would say, what if all people with disabilities would choose to organize their own care? It would be the end of institutions, and that would be the end of €1 billion industry. And the system led we have a complicated education and care system, financing system, and the system is such that I'm not sure how to, I told you about what I call abuse, special schools requiring parents to apply for a personal care budget, where in the past they would have given care and support themselves from their own budget. Care providers started abusing the personal budget system as well. Let me leave it at that, but there were some problems there. Next slide, please. If I look back at the 25 years, we see that of the total of nearly 300,000 people receiving long-term care, 7.7% opt for personal budget. That's a large minority, and it can be used as a lever for transforming long-term care. You could also say that 7.7 people who are eligible to live in institutions show that they can use the same money to live independently. But the percentage is not rising. Many of the 7.7% use the budget to buy themselves a place in a group home or even into a large institutional setting. And I think the percentage is not growing because using a personal budget just to organize your independent living, personal assistance at home, is not easy. There's no infrastructure to facilitate independent living. There's no pool of staff workers. You can't fall back on an organization to help you organize the care. Personal budgets are only to be used for wages of personal assistants. You can't use the budget for organizing any costs. You can't use it for double shifts of personnel. You can't use it to train your staff. You can only use it one-on-one on an hourly wage for your personal assistants. Next slide, please.
So I'm just aware of the time, so I'll ask you to
nearly finished.
Try to wrap up in a minute or two. Thanks.
So what I was in the system now, parents will choose personal budgets as long as they can organize their own care team for the children. No one is helping them. They can pay wages, but no one is helping them organize it, how to this team of assistants and to live independently. The same applies for children who want to take care of the elderly people. They can use the personal budget to organize the care, but they have to organize it themselves. And adults with disabilities should be able to organize their own care team. Next slide, please. Oh, that was the end. Sorry. I'll finish with the sheet I didn't send you apparently. It's sort of a black and white system. You either go to an institution and receive care, or you apply for the personal budget, but there's nothing in between. There's no support structure in society to help you. There's no organization who would provide you with personal assistance if, for instance, one of the assistants reports in sick in the morning. Government has no vision on institutionalization. They don't care really if people choose to live in an institution or for the personal budget. So they don't have a policy for deinstitutionalization. And that means there's no infrastructure built to build more community support. And community support is needed, and there is sort of an organization needed for persons using this personal care budget. You have to either do it all on your own, and if you can't, you resort to the institutional living. And there should be something in between. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. I think you raised really the challenges that the system is facing there in Netherlands, but also highlighted the alternative to institutionalization, personal assistance, and what you raised is quite important in the issue like we were facing in Serbia regarding what the personal assistance is for, whether it's for fun activities or productive activities. Like also our system is emphasizing those productive activities related to labor, education, or social participation, like in political parties or civil society organizations, but not the holidays, fun, and other leisure activities. But we'll come back to that. Let's hear from our next speaker, who is Asa Emtelin from Sweden. Welcome, Asa. Asa is from a cooperative of users of personal assistance called JAG. JAG in Sweden means I, right? If I understood well. But Asa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to participate. And as you said, I work within the cooperative Jag as press and PR secretary, and my personal connection to personal assistance is my sister, Anna, who also has assistance in Jag. And I will, during my 10 minutes, briefly describe how personal assistance is organized in Sweden, and to describe the value of personal assistance for adults with intellectual disabilities. I would like to share mine and my sister's personal experience from living in an institution and her transfer to personal assistance. And I will try to share my presentation, and Rados, if I will have trouble, I will ask you to help me. But
no worries, if it doesn't work, I have it on my slide.
Okay, so it should be this screen, I think. I have 2 screens. Okay, now let's see. So please let me know what you see here.
Yes, it's visible, but if you can make it a full screen, that would be great. Yes.
Yeah. And I'll try just to find my script as well, which I hope you don't see now. You only see the presentation, right?
Yes, only the presentation. Thanks.
Great. Personal assistance in Sweden. The law on personal assistance services was introduced in Sweden in 1994. And I will add that there will probably be a few I will mention things that I believe that Ines has already spoken about, and I have also found a few similarities with both Belgium and the Netherlands. Well, in 1994, the legislation was introduced of personal assistance services. And it is reserved for persons with the most complex and extensive needs. And if you need assistance for more than 20 hours a week with basic needs such as washing, dressing, eating, communicating, and moving about, you can obtain attendance allowance. And you must also belong to one of 3 groups, which are persons with a development disorder like autism or related disability, persons with considerable and durable impaired intelligence after brain damage in adult years caused by violence, for example, from an external source or any physical illness, and persons with other durable physical or mental disabilities, which are evidently not caused by normal aging. Yes, and a self-determined life is what Jag wants to achieve for all our users of personal assistance. And the service should not and isn't connected to a specific place like your home or an institution. The support takes act where you are, whether at school or at work, at the shopping mall, at traveling, or when meeting friends, etc. And everyone can exercise self-determination, for example, by showing approval or disapproval in any situation. So achieving self-determination requires that the people supporting you can interpret and draw the right conclusions from your way of expressing things. It requires that they value your communications and respect your decisions. For example, just lifting a finger or blinking could mean yes, and not lifting your finger could mean no. And it takes a person to understand that. And in that way, you can communicate and express your needs. And for that, a legal representative is important. And it's also, by that, very important to have a legal representative that you can communicate with. Yeah, so I will show you a model of a traditional structure and the structure of personal assistance. And as you can see, it's a completely different hierarchy in personal assistance and in traditional structure. And this explains the way to self-determination. So the user has the power to run the assistance in the way that suits him or her the best, supported by a legal representative, and also in close cooperation with a service guarantor. And the service guarantor is supporting by supervising the assistance. So some figures in Sweden, the funding is 31.80 euros per hour, and the main part is paid by the state. Today in Sweden, almost 15,000 persons have personal assistance, and 50% of those have an intellectual or cognitive impairment, or they are under the age of 18. And the funding should cover salaries for the personal assistants, of course, and taxes, other social fees, and what's very important is that it really must cover costs for introduction of new assistants and further education for the whole group of personal assistants. And that is to maintain a high level of assistant. And as I think Belgium mentioned earlier, anyone could work as a personal assistant. There's no certain degree or education to become a personal assistant. It should be a person that is engaged and really wants to give the service. It could be men and women, young, old, and you have to work day, night, weekends on a schedule, and it's a quite flexible job, I would say. I would like to tell my sister's story, just to, I think many of you certainly know, but I think it's interesting still, because it really shows the differences between the two structures that you could see in my presentation just before. So, and while I'm telling you, I will stop the presentation for a while, but here's my older sister, Anna. She has an intellectual disability, She has no speech. She has autistic traits, sometimes an acting out behavior, but she's really on the notes. She has humor, appetite for life, and understands almost everything you say to her. I'm just trying to have my script here. She communicates all the time with gestures, sounds, signs, body language, and it's not that difficult to read her. She's quite clear, but what's really difficult is to know exactly what she means and exactly what she wants. So that takes a lot of time to get to know her. And even though Anna is 6 years older than me, I was the one to move away from home first in my 20s. And it would take until Anna was in her 40s before she moved away from home. We grew up together with our parents, and she has never, during her childhood, she never lived at an institution. We grew up as sisters. But the choice fell on a group home at that time because for several reasons, we thought that would be a good option for her. And it worked pretty well at first, but after a while, things started to happen that shouldn't happen in a home. Her belongings disappeared and things broke, and she didn't get the support that she really needed in taking care of her hygiene and with meals and such. And quite soon she began to show clear signs of mental illness. And we tried to point out shortcomings at the group home, but we were met with irritation and reluctance. And they were often understaffed with various substitutes who came and left one after another. And no one had really time to get to know Anna and learn how to communicate with her and interpret her. So she really couldn't express her needs and her will. And someone else was all the time deciding what was best for her. So what we could see was that the support was stuck in the house where she lived, where people that hadn't chosen each other were lumped together. And Anna didn't have, or no one had control over a decision that affected them who lived there. So she needed to adapt to the home in a way that was impossible for her. And when we relatives and representatives tried to influence, we became unpopular and excluded. And that also hit back at Anna. So it turned out more and more like a 1920s institution where a group of experts with power took advantage of our family. And it went so far that Anna had to move back home again to survive. And thankfully, she was granted personal assistance. And now she's very well, and she lives in her own apartment with assistants 24/7. And me and my mother are her legal representatives. And I really want to be clear that it wasn't a malice from any individual or any special person at the group home. We have to look at this from a higher level, and that this is the consequence of structures and a support that is not individual. It's stuck in the home, in the workplace. And I think you just mentioned before me that personal assistance isn't supposed to be fun things. I think that personally, now that Anna can live as she wants, she can do all the things that anyone else does in her life. She can go shopping and she can go having coffee with friends, and she can live her life as she wants, like anyone else. And I mean, those are not things just for having fun. I mean, those are things which are living a life, just like everyone else. And also, I think it's highly discriminating. Oh, is it the time?
Yeah, I'm just being aware of the time because we have 2 remaining speakers, but if I can ask you, to wrap up, because you raised
yes,
so many
I will wrap up.
things,
Yes, of
which
course.
we can come back in the discussion later on.
Yes, sure. So what my point is that in Sweden, the debate with politicians and the government and municipalities is that we need to argue about those 2 structures, and that personal assistance is the way to self-determination and the keys to independent living. That's my story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asa. I also appreciate what you raised about educational profile of personal assistants, because that's always something that is coming up for people who are working with people with learning difficulties, like this prejudicial thinking that there should be only certain kinds of profiles or defectologists, who know how to work or communicate with people who should be the ones to provide the assistance. But what you said, that it's actually open for people to choose whatever person they want. Like that's certainly important.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. So we'll come back to you in the discussion. I'm sure people will have things to ask. We have 2 remaining speakers, but I would definitely aim if we can maybe have a little bit less time for you. So if you can target, to wrap up in 8 minutes, next 2 speakers, so to have the discussion later on. Istok is our next speaker. Istok is coming from association called Somček from Slovenia. And Istok, the floor is yours. We're listening.
Dobar dan svima. Ja ću govoriti srpsko kako sam naučio nekada. Osobna lična asistencija u Sloveniji je sa zakonom usvojena prije 4 godina, izvodi se od januara 2019 i na osnovu ovog zakona svaka osoba sa bilo kakvom invaliditetom ima pravo na osobnu asistenciju koju stiče na osnovu procjene koju donesi komisija na osnovu upitnika. Ako osoba dobije najmanje 30 sati asistencije, ona može da pronađe neku organizaciju, ili je to nevladina organizacija ili neko drugo udruženje koja mu obezbedi i zaposli ličnog asistenta. Primer, odnosno sistem je možda u nekim stvarima sličan švedskom sistemu i na osnovu priznatih sati lične asistencije država izvodiocu plati sve one sati odrađene asistencije koje je osoba sa invaliditetom primila od 1, 2, 3, 4 osobna asistenta. Tu su osobe sa intelektualnom invaliditetom izjednačene sa svim ostalim osobama, s tim što osobe sa intelektualnom invaliditetom obično imaju jednog zastupnika, zakonskog zastupnika koji je ili jedan od roditelja, a može da je to i neka druga osoba. Tako sam i ja kao otac 30-godišnje kćerike sa najtežim oblikom cerebralne paralize, zastupnik i ja učestvujem u svim postupcima za podnošenje molbe, za traženje izvođača, za kad se odabire osobne lične asistente, ali najbitnije je po našem mnenju, po mnenju organizacije koju i zastupam kao direktor, da i osobe sa intelektualnim invaliditetom imaju pravo na samostalan, nezavisan život i da moraju da i same pokazuju, odnosno ispoljuju kakve su njihove potrebe, na koji način žele da se im potrebe udovoljuju i da nisu osobni asistenti ili mi kao roditelji osobe koji određujemo što oni žele i na koji način da se im pružaju neke usluge. Kao što je rekla koleginica iz Švedske, i naša kći ne govori kao mi ostali, ali jasno sa mimikom, sa odgovaranjem sa da ili ne, jasno kaže šta joj odgovara i šta joj ne odgovara. Kao roditelji moramo da priznamo i našoj odrasloj djeci sa intelektualnim invaliditetom da imaju pravo na samostalan život, isto kao i naša ostala djeca, s tim što moramo da obezbedimo okolinu, način na koji će oni moći da jasno izražavaju svoje potrebe i svoje želje. U Sloveniji, koja mislim da ima dobar zakon, izvršavanje, provođenje ovog zakona po mom i našem mnenju išlo je krivim putem, jer je mnogo roditelja koji su prije zakona o ličnoj asistenciji imali status porodničnog pomoćnika. To je status po našem zakonu o socijalnom osiguranju, gdje su roditelji, jedan od roditelja koji je napustio posao i ostao kod kuće da brine za svoju ili djecu ili odraslu djecu, mogao da prima neku naknadu od države u visini oko minimalne plate. Prije je to bila čak i manje od minimalne plate, a plata osobnog asistenta u Sloveniji je viša od minimalne plate. Zbog toga su neki od roditelja zatražili ličnu asistenciju i pronašli, odnosno uzeli nekog izvođača osobne asistencije, lične asistencije koji ih je zaposlio, jer status porodničnog pomoćnika nije bio status radnog staža, nego su se samo platili osiguranja, a tu je bila i viša plata i plaćana sva osiguranja i radni staž. I ovi roditelji u svom odnosu do svojih odrasle djece sa intelektualnim invaliditetom nisu promenili odnosna u smislu da im priznaju svojstvo odrasle osobe gdje same mogu da odlučuju šta i na kakav način žele da žive. Još uvijek žive obično u porodici, još uvijek ne žive samostalno i mislim da je i za osobe sa intelektualnim invaliditetom jako bitno da i one imaju svoj stan gdje mogu da samostalno žive, da imaju usposobljene lične asistente koji ih razumeju, koji im pružaju one usluge koje im trebaju i to nisu samo osnovne usluge oblačenja, ishrane, lične higijene, nego i ostale usluge kao što je društveni život, otići na kavu, otići na, ne znam, u bioskop ili bilo gdje. I to mislim da je jedna od važnih stvari da mogu i odrasle osobe sa intelektualnim invaliditetom živjeti jednako kvalitetan život. Zbog toga mislim da ćemo morati u Sloveniji ispraviti ovu naš pogrešan put gdje su neke porodice koji su imali i imaju odrasle osobe sa najtežim invaliditetom zaposlile i po 2, čak i 3 i više porodnične člane, majka, otac, možda i sestra, brat, koji nude ličnu asistenciju, ali u osnovu oni su našli tu svoj posao i osobi sa invaliditetom život si nije ništa poboljšao.
Hvala isto.
Mislim da smo došli
da pitanja. Ključnu misao, pa da polako, zamolili su nas i prevodioci iz Bugarske da damo 5 minuta pauze, ali ako treba da sumirate za kraj ključnu poruku.
Dobro, ja bih s tim završio. Ako će biti na kraju pitanja, mislim da je najbitnije da su i osobe sa invaliditetom, mentalnim invaliditetom jednakopravno prihvaćene kao i svi ostali i da se im pruža mogućnosti za samostalan, nezavisan život.
Thank you so much, Istok. I think you also raised pertinent question about mistakes and not to repeat or to try to avoid in the reform system. But as I said, Bulgarian translator asked us to make a 5-minute break because he is the only one translating to Bulgarian, unlike other translators. So let's make a 5-minute break and come back in 4:25. Now it's 4:20. And in the meantime, I would encourage participants to write the questions in the chat. And yes, let's do a small break. And we hear Kate afterwards.
I'll just try to upload my slides while we have a break.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. If it doesn't work, I can share from my side. So. But I see it's coming up, so it should be okay. Yes, it's visible, so we'll start in a few minutes.
Ja sam trenutno u putu, završila sam dan i danas sam htjela Kruševac, pa evo vraćam se. Ovo što rade su pritači. Da neke stvari jesi, stvarno to jeste u pravu si, ali znaš šta, ipak je na nama da probamo sve. I ja sam pre maja mjeseca sam imala neka predavanja, neka svjetska zdravstvena organizacija je plaćala predavanja nekih defektologa i psihologa, pedagoga, predavanja su bila u domu zdravlja. I sada kad god pomenem ja ili neko od ljudi koji su bili, znači na 7-8 mama je bilo, a moglo da bude što više, vjerojatno ljudi nisu ni znali. Njih nekoliko, kada smo spomenuli
I can see who is on, like whose voice is on, but if you want, you can turn off you can mute your mic. Zato što čujemo konverzaciju, tako da sad je okej. Hi again. I hope it was enough time for Bulgarian translator. If it isn't, please tell me, and otherwise we would continue. So our next speaker is Kate Siptorn. I hope I'm pronouncing it Kate, but Kate will be joining. I see on her video that she's not near the computer, so we'll give 30 seconds more for Kate to come. But Kate is also a mother of a daughter with learning difficulties, and she has personal experience as a parent of using the personal assistance. So we'll hear a final example from England, and then we'll have a discussion. How can we move forward with the system reform in Serbia? Kate, I see you're here, so welcome again. We see your slides, so please, the floor is yours.
Okay, so hi from England, everybody. This is a picture of my daughter, Maddie. So she lives at home with me and her dad, and she needs support 24/7. She has we say learning disabilities in the UK, but intellectual disabilities, and she's autistic, and she's 30. So she sounds quite similar to some of the other people we've been hearing about, in that she doesn't use speech to communicate, and people have to get to know her very well. She uses gestures and body language, and we don't always know exactly what she means. We employ 4 personal assistants who work from Monday to Friday, and I look for people who have the right personality and the right approach. I don't look for educational qualifications, just so that you know that. A bit of background, I'll do this quickly. So our law is the main law is the Care Act 2014, and as a family or as a person, I go with Maddie, and we have a social worker who assesses what Maddie can and can't do, and they look particularly at sort of practical things like eating, drinking, getting dressed, and so on. But they also look at things like having friends, maintaining personal relationships, going to work, going out in the local community. And interestingly, there's a whole bit in the Care Act now about well-being, which talks about people's physical, mental, and emotional well-being. It talks about having access to leisure. It talks about your social well-being and people being able to make a contribution to society. So some of those sort of fun and contribution things that other people have mentioned, they are in our law. That doesn't mean we don't have to sometimes fight for them. So you can, if you need support with at least 2 of these things, then you can be eligible for care from the state. It is means tested. So this is how Maddie's support works. So the council, through local government, pays money into my bank account every 4 weeks so that I can pay the PAs. So I've got total control of the money. And I manage everything except payroll. So I sort of do the recruitment, day-to-day management, daily timesheets, managing annual leave and covering if somebody's on holiday or sick. Usually I would say if someone's sick, then it's me or Maddie's dad who covers. We don't have anybody else. But we work with the PAs, so together we know what Maddie likes to do, and so we'll decide what she's going to do every day. There are some things she does regularly on different days of the week. And then once a year we meet the social worker, and the idea is that she talks to us about how things are working, you know, is Maddie getting a good life, and, you know, how am I managing the budget? So I have to produce quite detailed accounts, even receipts for cups of tea. So if Maddie goes for tea with a personal assistant and her budget pays for that cup of tea for the personal assistant, but I have to give the council a receipt for it. And we sometimes have arguments. In fact, we usually have arguments every year about some of the things that I spend the money on. For example, paying for gym membership. So she goes to a local gym where she goes swimming. And after about 5 years of arguing, this year they finally agreed that I can do that. And the same with going to the cinema. So I have a monthly pass for the cinema because she loves going. And I take that out of her budget, and it's taken about 5 years to get the council to agree that I can do that. But I always fight them and I always win. So this is some of the things that Maddie does. So you can see at the top, there's pictures of her with her 4 PAs, and they're all fabulous. And they're all very much focused on Maddie and what makes sense for her. One of them lives quite close, and Maddie's a bit like a member of the family. She's really welcome at the PA's house. She's going around there next Monday. All the children know her, and that's a really important relationship. She helps out in the local community. It's been hard for us to find things for her to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but she helps with a food bank and a toiletries bank. And she also helps out at a club for older people with dementia. She loves going to the theatre, to the cinema, you know, maybe, I don't know, 10 times a year. It's not a weekly thing. But cinema is definitely weekly. She loves sort of Disney films, and she'll go and see them, you know, 3 or 4 times each. Art galleries and stuff she quite likes, but sometimes she's coming along because we've all gone as a family. And then physical well-being is really important. So she goes swimming maybe 3 times a week. She goes cycling if it's not raining. It often rains in the UK. And she loves going to visit sort of country houses that have gardens and walking around the gardens. And it doesn't really matter what she does, every day she goes for coffee and quite often cakes. I think there's 2 pictures here. You can see Maddie really likes cake. And then in the bottom right, there's a picture which talks about seeing friends, and that's a day service. It's not run by the council. It's run by a sort of local charity, really, and it's the only one that she goes to, and she goes there maybe once a week, sometimes twice a week, if they're doing things that make sense for her, which is basically craft activities. So that's Maddie's life. Rados asked me, you know, why is she at home and why are we doing this and what are the alternatives? And I have to say it is a worry because we're getting older, and it sort of keeps me awake at night about what's going to happen to Maddie in the future, you know, if we stop doing this. But the main choices for adults with intellectual disabilities in the UK are you live with your family, supported living. So I would say that's up to 6 people sharing accommodation and support. And sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 houses or bungalows together. And some of the problems with that is that people have to fit into the staff shifts. So you'll have staff work, you know, finishing, changing over at 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. So I know people who have to be home at 3 p.m, which is way too early. And sometimes you find people are ready for bed or in bed at 9 p.m. at night, because that's the staff rota. And they're often expected, I think they're generally expected to do things as a group, and they may not be living together because they're friends. You know, they may have been put in the same house by the local council, but then they're expected to all go together to a day service or all go together to do their shopping. So it's not individualized enough.
Kate, I would ask you like in a minute to wrap up, and then we open the discussion.
Okay, so I won't go through those, but there are some new ideas emerging. So some things I found hard. So finding a good provider can be hard. Having the council try to control what you spend your money on, finding good PAs when we've got low unemployment and they're paid basically the minimum wage. And a big thing for me around supported living is that the provider and the accommodation come together. So if you don't like the support you're getting, you might have to move out of your house. And that's a big no-no and something to avoid for me. Yeah, so care and support still isn't person-centered enough. It's left a lot to families, and there's no investment in learning and development for peoples to help us understand the system and to think about things like person-centered planning. And then just at the bottom, I've got some links to some good resources. So thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. We heard from all our guest speakers how the systems look like in other countries, and mainly how the system of direct payments is operating. But let's now open the floor for the questions from our participants. And I see in the chat that we already have a couple of questions and comments. So I will read them out, and then maybe we can choose who to answer. The goal of this discussion is a little bit to reflect on the current system of provision of personal assistance in Serbia, and to see what are the challenges, how we can make the personal assistance for adults with learning difficulties a reality. So first comment I will read out from Gordana Rajko from Center for Independent Living, the organization which acts as a service provider and provide personal assistance for people with physical impairments in Serbia. So she is saying, I guess because in Serbia there is no personal assistance for people with intellectual impairments, that it is not envisaged to talk about the state of play in Serbia. But in any case, I think that should be a separate service which should be developed in our system. So Gordon is saying that shouldn't be regarded as a personal assistance, but some other service. Jelena Mihajlović is saying, I would like to ask everyone how to prevent the professionals to lead the institutionalization, since they advocate standing from the position of the best interests. We must change the system, but in the new system, these professionals should not. And then there is breaking the sentence. Maybe some text is missing, but Jelena, you feel free to add. Jelena is also asking Gordana, the claim that Gordana made, why would that be a separate service, the personal assistance for adults with intellectual impairments? Does that mean that adults with that people with intellectual impairments and autism are not people with disabilities? Yeah, so maybe we can start a discussion with this, just to set the scene. Our current system, our current standards of provision of personal assistance are setting the eligibility criteria, saying who has the right to apply for personal assistance. And those are the people who qualified for the so-called carers allowance. This is sort of monetary payment from the system of social protection. In Serbian, nadoknada za pomoć nekog drugog lica. People who are active, who are engaged in some productive activities such as the labor, education, or activities in political parties or civil society organizations. So it's not for leisure. And it's establishing a number of other criteria. So, for example, the criteria that the person should be having assessed as in need of higher levels of support. So let's come to that and discussing. Like, does anybody want to respond or engage in a discussion from parents present in this call or other speakers? So the thing is that the criteria are exclusionary in a way that they're setting also the ability for reasoning as a criteria to use the personal assistance. So this kind of criteria is much exclusionary for people with impairments, because that ability for reasoning is prejudicially, like making adults with intellectual impairments and such criteria have so far been excluding people. Snezana from MDRI has raised the question. Others, if you want to raise any question, please use the option of raising the hand or type in the chat. Snezana, go ahead.
Hvala, pozdrav svima. Radoše, ti si sada sumirao između ostalog i ono što sam ja želela da kažem, ali ajte ovako za početak. Nedavno sam proverila prema podacima koje je objavio tim za socijalno uključivanje i smanjenje siromaštva, personalna asistencija je usluga koja se pruža u Srbiji samo u 17 jedinica lokalne samouprave sa ukupno 223 korisnika. To je po meni poražavajuće, s obzirom na to koliko osoba sa invaliditetom živi u našoj zemlji i koliko je osoba, onih kojima je intenzivna podrška potrebna. Osim što radim u inicijativi MDRI, ja sam i mama mladića sa autizmom, dakle imam i neko lično iskustvo i, kako da kažem, privatno mišljenje kao roditelj osobe sa invaliditetom. I zaista mislim da bez obzira na stepen podrške koji je nekoj osobi potreban, da bi država svima nama trebala da obezbedi pomoć i podršku, nekome neko kraće vreme, nekome 24 sata, ali da je svim osobama sa invaliditetom neophodna podrška. Meni su u ovim izlaganjima koje smo čuli bile jako zanimljivi ovi delovi gde su ljudi pričali o tome da li je podrška potrebna samo za neke, ajde da kažemo, produktivne aktivnosti ili je ona neophodna i za korišćenje slobodnog vremena i zabavu. Iz mog ličnog iskustva najviše je upravo potrebna za zabavu i za izlaske, za provođenje slobodnog vremena, zato što ako neko ide u školu ili negde radi, onda je već uključen u aktivnosti. Ali ono što je moje iskustvo, mom sinu upravo najviše nedostaje druženje koje mi kao porodica ne možemo da mu obezbedimo i omogućimo. I upravo su to aktivnosti u kojima je njemu najčešće potrebna podrška. I ja stvarno mislim da ovaj naš pravilnik koji reguliše uslove na osnovu koga neko može da ostvari pravo na personalnu asistenciju je vrlo restriktivan i rigidan. Nedavno sam ga čitala. Za većinu usluga uslovi za njihovo ostvarivanje nisu tako strogo propisani i praktično je na Centru za socijalni rad da proceni stepen podrške koja je potrebna nekoj osobi. Kad je u pitanju personalna asistencija, ja bih rekla da takva procena je potpuno nepotrebna, jer su uslovi toliko strogi da jako mali broj ljudi uopšte može da aplicira za tu uslugu. Tako da, eto, to je moj komentar, ne bih imala pitanje.
Hvala, Sneža. Ja bih se nadovezao na tvoj komentar o sistemu procene, zato što su naši govornici u više navrata pomenuli da je sistem procene individualizovan i da se broj potrebnih sati obezbeđuje na osnovu toga što je Katie pomenula da socijalni radnici su ti koji procenjuju šta osoba može, šta ne može i koje su interesovanja. Prosto kriterijumi koji su kod nas napravljeni su tu faktički da zamene sistem procene. Jer iako u Zakonu o socijalnoj zaštiti predviđa da procenu vrši i Centar socijalnog rada i pružalac usluge, mi koristimo praktično indikator, odnosno ostvarenje tuđe nege i pomoći, kao pokazatelj da, odnosno prečicu, da tako kažemo, da je toj osobi potrebna personalna asistencija. Dakle, samo one osobe koje su ostvarile pravo na uvećanu tuđu pomoć, što je potpuno drugo pravo iz sfere socijalne zaštite, mogu uopšte da se prijave i da apliciraju za personalnu asistenciju. Dakle, ne postoji nezavisan sistem procene koji bi osobi omogućio da imala ili nemala tuđu negu i pomoć dođe i prijavi se za personalnu asistenciju i da ta njena potreba bude onda procenjena nezavisno. Već samo se, dakle, povezuje sa ostvarenjem ovog novčanog davanja, da tako kažem. Sad to je administrativno jednostavnije, ali sa druge strane pravno neodrživo, ja bih rekao, zato što onaj koji se prijavljuje za procenu invaliditeta, odnosno telesnog oštećenja, pa i procenu prava, procenu potrebe za tuđom negom i pomoći, ne zna i nije svestan da se u zavisnosti od ishoda te procene, da je njegova sudbina određena, da li će imati prava i na neke socijalne usluge. Pa ako bude odbijen za tuđu negu i pomoć, neće imati pravo ni da se kvalifikuje za neke druge usluge. Tako da to je problem, ali jeste da je prečica i da je administrativno lakše, ali istovremeno, dakle, sve osobe nemaju uopšte isprava ni priliku da se prijave za ovu uslugu, tako da sam samo hteo da pomenem ono što je Sneža već načela. Takođe bih rekao, Gordana je pomenula da bi možda bilo dobro da se ova usluga za odrasle sa intelektualnim invaliditetom nazove ili tretira na neki drugi način. Sad, možda ta potreba proističe iz toga što kod nas ne postoji pravo na socijalne usluge. Dakle, socijalne usluge su finansirane od strane lokalnih samouprava u zavisnosti od njihovih nadzora i kako da kažem, odluke ili volje da podrže i da plaćaju određene usluge u svojim lokalnim samoupravama. Dakle, nije pravo koje je pravno utuživo, da tako kažem, da osoba može da očekuje personalnu asistenciju, već to zavisi da li će uspešno organizacija zagovarati u njihovoj opštini da se lokalna samouprava osvesti i izdvoji sredstva za te namene. Kada bi pristup socijalnim uslugama bio formulisan kao pravo, koje je neosporno kada se utvrdi potreba za njim, onda ja mislim da bi se i izbegla ova priča da li je nazivati drugačije, zato što ako je nazovemo drugačije, onda se otvara prostor, rekao bih, organizacijama koje pružaju različite usluge, prosto da svaka zagovara za svoju uslugu koju ona smatra da je najvažnija u sistemu. ali međutim kada bi se pravo povezalo na pojedinca kome je toga potrebna, mislim da bi to otklonilo ovu potrebu da sad razvrstavamo na neke druge načine i nazivamo ovu uslugu drugačije. Svakako, kao što je Ines na početku rekla, na međunarodnom nivou i sam komitet za prava osoba s invaliditetom pominje personalnu asistenciju prosto kao uslugu koja bi trebalo da je dostupna svima onima kojima je potrebno. Ali hajde da popričamo o tome. Pogledat ću da li je neko digao ruku. Mislim da se Gordana javila pa spustila ruku, ako ne grešim. Ako grešim možete opet podići. I Jelena je podigla ruku, pa evo vidim da je Gordana opet. Tako da Jelena pa Gordana.
Da li samo mogu nešto?
Ovo ne, Jelena, čujemo se.
Da. Well, I would like to ask a question and two questions and one comment. First of all, I am the mother of an adult autistic son who is 37 years old, and I am also his lawful guardian. So the question is, how should he apply for the personal assistance because he is deprived of his legal capacity? That's the question. And also for the Kate from UK, a comment. So as a legal guardianship that I took for my son, and you said also that a similar law is in Great Britain. So sometimes it is not maybe the best choice to the parent making the best, the decisions, what is in the best interest for his son or daughter. I think I do that, but you know, there are several types of parents, and maybe sometimes a parent can make a mistake non-intentionally, if you understand what I mean. That's a comment, really. And also a question for Asa from Sweden. I like her story very much and agree with the most that she said. I would like only to ask her, she said, if I understood well, that her sister is living separately in her own apartment with a personal assistant. Is that correct? And how did you manage to obtain these kind of, I mean, in financial terms? Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Jelena.
So also, maybe we can start with you, and Jelena also raised the issue of guardianship, and I think more of you mentioned that also you're acting as a legal representative. I think that's the term you used, Asa, and somebody also mentioned guardianship. But yes, answer this, Asa, and maybe then we can hear from other speakers if you also want to comment.
Okay, thank you. Yes, she lives in her own apartment. For her, it's a solution that she has a separate apartment where my parents live. So exactly how it's financed, I mean, my parents are still able to help her, but for others, and generally in Sweden, there are apartments sort of handed by the municipalities, and there are financial contributions so that you actually can pay your rent and live there even if you don't have an income. There are other, I'm not sure of the English word, fundings from the government that persons with disabilities sort of get so that you can still be able to live in your apartment. Only that these persons, of course, live on a minimum of of income to survive, which is also discriminating in many ways, only if that's another discussion. But to answer your question, yes, she lives in her own apartment, and we as her family, we can still help her. And I can see connections with Kate from Britain, that what will happen when we can't be supportive. So even if personal assistance works very well in Sweden in many ways, there are still many issues and boundaries and obstacles that we fight for.
Thank you, Asa. I see Kate's comment. Kate is saying that also there is a court of protection in England to which Kate has to report her key actions and decisions every year, and then they have to say if they're satisfied with it, they're sending someone to their house to check that man is happy and okay. So I would give floor to Gordana. Gordana raised the issue that she thinks that it might be useful to name this, to introduce this service in a system as something separated than what we already have. So go ahead, Gordana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that people did not understand me in a wrong way. Of course, that I think that the persons with intellectual disabilities are disabled persons as well, and that they should have support which is needed, which is not the case at the moment. When I said a kind of a new service, as in our law, we have services in the local communities, but this one is obviously missing. It's because due to our law, each service needs to have its own criteria, who is eligible, and the standards, to which standards the service will be provided, because in our country we don't have the system of direct payment, that the service is provided through the service providers, who might be different organizations, individuals, and so on. The benefit you talked about, allowance for the help of another person, is in a way one kind of direct payment, but according to the research in our country, more than 50 people who get that money never use it to buy personal assistance. And just one comment for you, the social services are the right which is included in the law for social welfare. But it's only different from which budget it should be financed. But it is a right that people with disabilities have through the law of social protection. But due to the centralization system in Serbia, it is local communities who provide the money for that. But they are not prescribing which type of services people could have. But of course, we have the system that the centers for social work assess the needs, and we do have there a lot of problems. I don't have anything against having a personal assistant as one service, but then we need to define who are the applicants, which different conditions they will need to have, and of course, what are the standards for providing such service, which are particularly important in the case of persons with intellectual disabilities, as they need support from someone else to make decisions and control the service. And as somebody says, it might be persons who don't work in the best interest of that disabled users. But certainly I welcome this webinar and different experience that we have exchanged. And as we are expecting the law for social protection to be changed next year, this is one of the things that we could think about. Thank you.
Hvala puno, Gordana. Kao što je Gordana rekla, svakako centri za socijalni rad imaju nadležnost da vrše procenu potreba. Međutim, postavlja se pitanje šta kada centar utvrdi da recimo postoji potreba za pomoći asistenta. To ne dovodi do toga da lokalna samouprava u kojoj je ta centar i u kojoj osoba živi, da ima obavezu da stupi u proces javne nabavke i obezbedi toj osobi potrebnu uslugu. Već je prosto to mogućnost, ali probili smo dosta vreme, predvideli smo da završimo u 4:45, sada je već 17 časova. Dao bih reč nekom iz naših domaćina MDRI-a, Dragana, pretpostavljam ti, da date završne komentare, s obzirom da znate da su u procesu izmene pojedinih akata koje se tiču ove teme, tako da Snežo ili Dragana, imate priliku.
Mogu ja da se uključim, ja bih se zaista, yes, I'd like to thank everyone for participation, and especially our speakers for sharing their experiences, and also people who joined the discussion. We will make note of all your comments in the chat box, as well as those that you made by joining the discussion live. There is an ongoing process at this minute, at this point of time. The Ministry of Labor, Employment and Social Policy is planning changes to the existing bylaws on the law on social welfare regarding different services that were defined by these bylaws. So I would like everyone to invite everyone who have certain suggestions regarding these bylaws to write to us or to the ministry with suggested changes. The working group, I don't think that has been formed already, but it will be mostly those will be mostly representatives of the public administration. So no guarantee for civil society participation, but we were invited to submit proposals, comments to the existing bylaws. So this is my invitation to you all to share some comments if you want, using our email address and contacting my colleagues in Serbia. So thank you again for participating. Hope you have benefited from different experiences that were shared, and hope to stay in touch and share the notes and conclusions from this webinar, and also join you when there is some other opportunity to continue this discussion.
Bye, everyone, on my behalf as well, and thank you to all guest speakers. Thank you so much. Some of our guest speakers posted in the chat that that we can share their email addresses if you have more questions for them. So thank you for that.
I suggest that we send an email to all the participants. Hopefully you have all shared your contact information in the form we ask. So we can follow up on this webinar and send you the material shared by the presenters and their contact information upon their approval. So thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mm.